Explorers dubbed it Shangri-La and the roof of the world. A land of breathtaking beauty and impossible terrain. A place where maps still have blank spaces and outsiders rarely venture. Here in this ancient realm of countless mysteries, a woman became determined to solve one of them. Hundreds of spectacular stone towers rise over the remote valleys of the Himalayas. Some in ruins, many still intact. Built perhaps near the time of Genghis Khan and the fierce Mongol conquest of Asia, the tower's history has been lost, forgotten to the ravages of time. Who built them, when and for what purpose? These were the questions that captured utterly the imagination of the Renaissance woman, Frédéric d'Aragon.
As I was in camp searching for snow leopards, I had come upon the most incredible structures I'd ever seen, standing alone in the middle of nowhere. As I began inquiring about them, I discovered with amazement that nothing was known.
Even the locals know little about the towers. Indeed, in this ancient land, only monks and pilgrims venture far from their home villages. Most have never seen the towers, and few are even aware of them. Consulting with Western Chinese scholars, Frederick, who speaks Mandarin and some Tibetan, found that the experts knew little about the towers, other than they had been reported in 4 regions of the Sino-Tibetan corridor. Among the Kiang, in Galrong, in Minyak, and further west in Kongpo. Frédéric d'Aragon would not quit until she knew the story of these remarkable skyscrapers. This is the account of 6 expeditions undertaken by a lone investigator. The shots you see of Frédéric were taken by her using a tripod, or by her driver or friends who at times came along on the journey. It was in 1998 that Frédéric had first come upon the towers. Spread across a region roughly the size of Texas, the towers inhabit an area that gives the word remote a new meaning. The inaccessible valleys of Kham were long closed to foreigners because of the aggressive character of the inhabitants. Until very recently, there were no roads at all in this mountainous terrain. Even today, access is difficult, due in summer to heavy rains and landslides, and in winter to snows and avalanches.
And then from then on, it depends of the weather, it depends of the rivers, it depends of a lot of things. You get stuck. Whenever night comes, that's where you're going to stay.
Frédéric sets out for the Min Mountains, where at 4,500 feet are found the Qiang, an ancient people.
Altogether, I think there are still about 100. I've seen about 100. But I was told there were more towers in some totally very, very remote areas, like you had to be for 3 days on horseback to get there. Altogether, there must have been at least 600 or 700 towers.
Modern Qiang are descendants from an ancient group of tribes who lived around Lake Kokonor and were already mentioned 3,000 years ago in Chinese inscriptions. Some of them migrated south, and by the 2nd century they were famous for building tall towers. By the 9th century, other Qiang had settled along the upper Yellow River and were to create the Minyak kingdom. The Qiang still speak distinct yet related dialects of an ancient language that predates Tibetan. But since the early Qiang had no written language, the story of how and why these towers came to be has been lost in time. Today, most Qiang also speak and generally write Mandarin Chinese. The local people are surprised yet delighted at Frédéric's interest in their old towers. This woman explains that her tower was partly destroyed by an earthquake long ago. She invites Frédéric to see for herself and meet her husband, the village wise man.
Ni hao.
This tower seems also to have burnt, leaving no wood that can be dated by a carbon test.
来，那不是这类型。
这个条路以前拿来吃什么？知道吗？
这个打仗。哦，以前嘛，攻坚嘛，这是。说攻坚的时候，别个来，敌人来了嘛，他们就交流上去。
那底下有个吧。
The woman points out a nearby village where Frederick might find old beams that could help date the structures. Frederick travels alone with her driver, Xiao Shu. This clever young Chinese driver will eventually double up as an assistant cameraman. Frederick sees a tower in a village that was badly damaged by earthquakes. The number of earthquakes here makes the presence of tall towers a mystery in itself. It is raining. Unaware of the danger, Frederick enters the tower to try and obtain a fragment of wood.
So I entered that tower without any fear, even if it looked a little bit shaky, and I just start sawing the wood. And as soon as I start sawing the wood, part of the wall collapsed. And as a matter of fact, when I went back there only 6 months later, the whole tower had collapsed.
Lesson learned. One should never enter the towers when it rains. This beam, safely located outside the tower at its base, cannot have been replaced and so must be as old as the building. The carbon test will in fact give but the time when the wood was cut, a close approximation as to when the tower was built. Kan is well watered by the monsoons and is far greener and richer than most of Tibet. For centuries, this region was a no man's land, regularly invaded and sacked by warlords. Could this possibly explain the presence of so many towers? One may wonder why all these towers are bunched together, and what is the significance of the thin ridges along their sides. As a local explains, we Qiang build ridges on the walls as reinforcements against earthquakes. The more the better. Such reinforcements have beyond doubt helped the towers stand up to the many tremors. The colorful Qiang are a nearly self-sufficient community. Today they are all farmers, tilling terrace fields that yield an abundant harvest in spite of the steep slopes. Some can afford satellite dishes that will enable them to watch television. The Qiang are not Buddhist. They venerate their ancestors and certain trees. They consider white stones sacred and a white sheep is essential to their rituals. Like the Tibetans and the related Tamangs of distant Nepal, they claim to be descended from the union of a monkey and a mountain-dwelling she-demon. These fine towers are not as tall as those once built by their ancestors. As the locals explain, after being defeated by the Chinese, the Qiang had to take refuge in the mountains and were forbidden by a Chinese emperor to build towers more than 50 feet high. The hardest part of Frederick's research so far is to find all the finger towers, as they have never before been charted, mapped, or even filmed. Frederick pursues a quest in the valleys inhabited by the Gyalrong. Every valley has a different dialect. People from one valley cannot understand people from the next. Most get by with kamke, a Tibetan traveler's language, or with Chinese. At 9,000 feet, set along a rich plain at the meeting of two valleys, the village of Songgan proudly flaunts 4 towers. Two of them are freestanding and star-shaped with 8 points each. Amazingly, they are taller than modern 15-story buildings. In spite of prayer flags nearby, they are not religious structures. What then could possibly have been their purpose? Tibetan folklore tells us of a legendary kingdom whose queen lived in a very high tower. Could this be the magical place? Are these young women the descendants of the woman of legend who once ruled these valleys? This tower can now be accessed by newly built outer steps that lead to the door set 20 feet high above the ground. Beneath the door, the tower is solid stone. The floors have been restored. The windows seem to be made for defense and are too few for this tower to have been a residence. Ladders once linked the platform-like floors. Inside, the space is extremely narrow as the walls are very thick. The flat dirt roof has collapsed and grass grows over the remains. What were these towers built for? Here their Chinese name is Feng Hu Tai, which means beacons. But if they were built as signal towers, why would you need more than one? The entrance to this tower is nearly 3 stories up. To explore the inside, Frederick must somehow find a very long ladder. The army in nearby Markham agrees to lend her the region's only tall ladder. The officer then refuses that Frederick climb up herself, but finally gives in when she agrees to use a rope.
Okay, Mayor.
Here the walls are black and charred. Carbon tests will reveal that these window beams are only 50 years old. This indicates these towers have been renovated. One can see that the door has been also modified. Samples from the tallest tower indicates that it dates from the 13th century. What was life like here when these strange towers were built? It was near the time of Genghis Khan's conquest of Asia, when the Mongols had invaded Tibet. Being 700 years old, the towers are likely to have been put to different uses at different times, making it even more difficult to find their original purpose. Today, the children sing in Chinese. Who knows what their language was here 7 centuries ago? Frederick hears of 2 towers further downstream in a nearby village. They might supply some answers. As in Songam, this freestanding star-shaped tower was erected in a village set upon a rich plain where 2 rivers meet. Could this be a clue?
Whenever I heard of another tower, my heart would beat faster. I was hoping that the yet unseen tower was finally going to reveal its mystery.
As in the Qiang villages, many houses here have buttress-like ridges against earthquakes. These ridges must be efficient, for the octagonal tower stands complete in spite of the frequent tremors, unlike the adjacent rectangular tower, which is severely damaged. These monks offer to guide Frederick to the Tamba region, where they claim rise over 100 towers, some the tallest in Kham. Monks often travel and mingle freely with laymen. From the onset, the weather is bad and rapidly gets worse. Soon, the water has gone completely wild, sweeping the road away and very nearly taking the car with it. Frederick has to turn back and find an alternate route to Tamba. At long last, a rainbow greets her as she reaches the enchanted valley of Tamba. Here there is no central village. Dozens of majestic freestanding giant structures dwarf the houses. The tallest is around 160 feet. Everywhere towers rise up, hugging the steep slopes. Could the towers be directly related to the region's wealth? 13 centuries ago, the Chinese Tang Annals described a rich kingdom of women in this area. Could this wealthy valley be the place? Beneath the towers, a rich harvest of wheat. Could the towers have been mere silos? But then why build the doors so high off the ground? Abundance of water and a surprisingly warm microclimate at 7,000 feet above sea level has made this valley one of the richest of Kham. The land well deserves its Tibetan name, Shar Gyalmot Saporong, the hot valley of the Eastern Queen. Here there are 2 harvests a year, one of wheat and one of corn. The wheat is here being flayed in the wind to separate the chaff from the grain. There is a time to sow and a time to reap. Abundance here, it seems, breeds happiness, and work is always accomplished to the tune of a song. Ploughing starts anew while the harvest is winnowed in the summer wind and stored away, but not in the towers. The grand size and elegance of all these houses speak of a rich egalitarian society, one in which each family may well have been responsible for its own safety, rather than depend upon a single chief. Were the towers built for defense? Certainly the houses were not. They are far too exposed and vulnerable. This tower, marked with a Buddhist sign for wind, is adjacent to a house and appears in good condition. It is the first we see associated with a religious symbol. Maybe it is still being used, but the tower is empty. Carbon tests of a fragment of an old beam will reveal that this tower was built 630 years ago, give or take 70 years. It was built practically at the same time as those of Songan, but with a different technique, as here much more mortar was used to secure the stones. Many towers are built away from fields and houses, so they could not have been primarily silos or defensive structures. One folktale claims that they were simply towers of pride, arrogant symbols of their owner's importance, built at a time when Kham grew rich from trade with Mongol-ruled China. Legend has it that the base was built at the birth of a son, and a new story added at each of the boys' birthdays. Maybe because here earthquakes are rare, most of the towers are square. All the more reason to study this lone, large, star-shaped tower. Fruit is found in great abundance in the area. The young man explains that the towers belong to no one, unless they are backed against the house. Since this tower is near his home, he feels free to climb into it. Difficult to access, it will nevertheless give up its secret, a small piece of wood. The sample would prove to be yet once again 790 years old. The swastika, found in many ancient cultures, represents for the Buddhist a symbol of permanence. The young woman of the house prepares hot breads prior to leaving for a festival in the valley. This harvest festival extends far back to before Buddhism reached the valley in the 11th century. Today, Tamba stands at an uncertain crossroads between two worlds, that of its secretive past and its future in modern China. Prayer flags decorate every place where evil spirits might lurk. This bridge crumbles under flags in honor of the Lungta, the wind horse, symbol of chance and good fortune. In all the Tamba area, there once stood over 260 towers. Approximately 70 are still standing, giant and amazing structures, unaffected by centuries of earthquakes and upheavals. These young people from Gyalrong cheerfully repair the road by hand in the same way their ancestors built the hundreds of monumental towers without modern tools or machinery. The people of Sopo had informed Frederick that all around there were towers in practically every village, often adjoining old castles. To her surprise, while naming the villages, they ran off most of the names of the 18 kingdoms of Gyalrong that some scholars believed were legendary. Perhaps they were not legendary after all. Frederick's research continues as she heads south, searching for towers in remote villages often inaccessible by car. The mountains get steeper. Frederick, deprived of her helper Xiao Shu, who is affected by high altitude, sets out alone carrying the heavy tripod. An old woman acts as guide. The presence of a fort close by could indicate that the tower served a purpose other than defense. Deep ravines and shaky bridges lead to distant villages, and yet more towers. At Pati, a great ruined castle stands in the village, far from a lone square tower. This castle is formed by two typical slant wall buildings on either side of a tower. The space between the three buildings being filled to consolidate the whole. The women spin and chat quietly in the shadow of the land's former past. Once these people were herders, and they've retained their nomad custom of wearing all their finery every day, wherever they go and whatever they are doing. Three towers rise on a distant crest, along the trail leading to the home of the Minyak. One of them resembles a star with 13 points. The tower is in ruins, yet one can still see high up an alignment of white stones, symbol of good luck. According to legend, the intricate design with 13 corners was drawn on the ground by a Tibetan woman with a ball of string. In gratitude and amazement, the local king married her for the feat. The passing herds suggest another possible purpose for the towers. Could they have been rallying points for nomadic herders on their annual migrations? A secure place in which to store the possessions they could not take along with them.
Since Minyak have roamed this land for 7 centuries, these nomads must be the descendants of the people who built the towers.
These nomads are Minyak, whose territory today lies south of the Gyalmo-Rong district. They were once part of the powerful Minyak kingdom that controlled the western portion of the Silk Road for 300 years until its destruction by the Mongols in 1227. After the destruction of their kingdom, they then moved southwards to where they are now found. Today's Minyak still speak a language related to the language of their lost kingdom.
The incredible mystery is, how come people who did not even have a written language had such sophisticated constructions? How were they able to find a way to build very tall towers that could also resist earthquakes?
The black yak-haired tents are the only homes of the nomads as they move about ever in search for better pastures. While some Minyaks are herders, others now live in villages. They often intermingle and share their produce, one exchanging butter and meat for the barley and peas of the other. The nomads consider their hard life as much more pleasant than that of the sedentary farmers who tilled the land. They prize their freedom and are quite well off, owning large herds of yaks. The nomads travel up into the mountains to cut trees, that they then haul down into the valleys, where tall trees are few. Frederick has come to realize that it is in the wealthiest valleys that the towers are likely to be found. The rich agricultural valleys of the Minyak at 10,000 feet harbor spectacular manor-like farmhouses. For the Minyak are both famed warriors and master builders. This covered bridge is another fine example of the local architect's talents. Yet here, if horses can cross, cars cannot, and Frederick must proceed on foot. These twin towers are truly fantastic beyond belief, to use the words of the first European to see them in 1880. They are assembled of uncut stones, some of great size, perfectly stacked with very little mortar in between.
It is an unbelievable achievement to have built such monuments, and that they have resisted hundreds of earthquakes. The builders were people with no written language, with no machines, and with only basic techniques. It just shows how resourceful human beings are.
Each of the 16 sides is identical within a few inches. This is the season for harvesting, and the peas and barley are stored in the upper floors of the houses. The homes are spacious, yet here again the towers seem to proclaim arrogantly the wealth of the community. As usual, the ground floor is used as a stable. Having already made friends with the villagers on a previous visit, Frederick has no trouble finding volunteers to help her in her search. The two towers are in near perfect condition. They appear modern, yet carbon dating will reveal that they are fully 850 years old, built more than 4 centuries before the Dutch settled Manhattan. The windows here would seem ideal for firing arrows, as they allow an archer to stand in them, unlike some of the windows of other towers examined. These dome-shaped clay pots are in fact funerary tormas, offerings of clay, often mixed with the ashes of the dead. Could this mean that the towers had a religious significance linked with the dead? Tradition has it that the Minyak cut up their dead upon this stone slab, therefore contradicting the possibility of the use of the towers in this ceremony. Sky burials are the most ancient of Tibetan rituals, probably hailing from ancient Persia. The body is cut up and served to the vultures, thus returning it into thin air, into the ether, one of the key components of man, along with earth, water, and fire. This ceremony has rarely been filmed and occurred while Frederick was studying the towers. These images, filmed with discretion, are a unique record of one of Tibet's most sacred rituals. These are the tools that will be used to cut up the corpse. After praying for a fruitful reincarnation for the deceased, the monks retire as the vultures close in for their sinister funerary feast. A special caste of men, the Shempa, cut up the corpse.
It's very emotional. The family is not present during a sky burial. Only the friends of the family are there. And when I asked them if I could film it, first they really didn't want to. But the people from the monastery were good friends of mine. And I told them I was just interested in their culture. I was not going to film the actual dead body, so they let me watch it. I did personally watch the body being cut, but I just didn't film it.
The skull is crushed and the bones mixed with tsampa, roasted barley flour. Nothing, absolutely nothing must remain.
I would like to be disposed in such a way. I'd rather be eaten by vultures than being eaten by worms anyway. They take you away in the sky. I think it's very poetic. Some of me would fly over those beautiful mountains.
The body has now entirely vanished into thin air, and the mystery of the towers remains complete. Frederick pursues a search in the nearby monastery. As the monk explains, this book written in gold, a volume of the Kanjur, confirms the practice of sky burials in this valley for over 670 years. But there is no mention of towers associated with the ceremony. To further complicate matters, Frederick learns of similar towers 400 miles to the west in Kongpo, part of the Tibet Autonomous Region. Once again, she sets off to see for herself. Kongpo is a land of great alpine forests, where in spite of the high altitude, macaque monkeys are found in large numbers. Situated at 11,000 feet, Basum's Blue Lake is famous since it is often mentioned in Tibetan mythology. Little is known about the origins of the people of Basum, who now speak Tibetan, but whose dialect is distantly related to that of the Chiang languages. Once again, freestanding towers are found in a region whose dialect is related to the Chiang languages. Here also, the people claim to be the descendants of the 6 children of the monkey and the mountain-dwelling Shidimun. The children of myth were hairy and had a tail that they lost when they learned to plant cereals and become farmers. Most women wear a medieval-like chasuble of wool. but more elegant are the ones made of silk lined with monkey fur. In 1935, the explorer botanist Kingdom Ward counted more than 200 towers in Kongpo. Today, only a dozen are standing, most of them in ruins. This tower is in good condition. It looks similar to the ones seen in the east, but a closer look will reveal many differences. The stones are small and the mortar more abundant. The openings are also small, too small to have been of much use. The door is located at the base, making it easier to break into the tower. This tower is not star-shaped, but has 12 90-degree angles, the result of interlocking rectangles. Carbon tests will reveal the Kongpo towers to have been built between the 10th and the 14th centuries. This makes some of these towers over 1,000 years old, the oldest dated by Frederick. In between her 6 expeditions, Frederick in Paris and then in the United States analyzes her findings, cross-checking the history of the various regions where the finger towers are found. Slowly, the puzzle falls into place. The carbon tests come up with a startling revelation. Except for the more recent, smaller Chiang towers, all the finger towers are ancient, built 600 to more than 1,000 years ago. All the finger towers are found in regions that have no written language and have no written records of their history. Until recently, neighbors considered them barbarians. Little did they know about the sophistication of the architecture to be found in these unreachable valleys. Nearly a millennium after they were built, the towers of the Himalayas have finally given up their secrets.
The towers, like the people, vary from one region to the next, so there is no simple answer as to their purpose.
The Chiang towers have thin fins and are part of fortified villages and were essentially defensive structures. The square and multi-sided towers of the Tumba valleys could be used for storage, but were essentially symbols of prestige. Built at a time of unprecedented wealth, when each family or village headman wanted to outdo his neighbors. The Kongpo towers were also towers of prestige. Extraordinarily, some of them were erected more than a century before the famous skyline of square towers built for the same reason in San Gimignano, Italy. Because they were erected on fertile plains where trade routes met, the 8-pointed star-shaped towers of Songam, Baisha, and the amazing twin towers of Remede in Minyak were without doubt arrogant trading posts.
Far better than books, these amazing towers tell us of the pride and grandeur of the people who once inhabited this magic and sacred land called Kham.
As a result of this research, these towers are being considered for an inscription on the UNESCO World Heritage List, recognition they very much deserve.
Go